Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. As a father of 3 kids in school myself, I know many people are anxious to hear today's updates, and we certainly wanted to share it with all of you as soon as we had it available. I'm joined, of course, today by Minister of Education Tom Osborne, Tony Stack, the CEO and Director of Education with the NLSD, Kim Christianson, the Director of Education with the Francophone School District, Bayvert Green Bay MHA Brian Moore, and Minister Lisa Dempster. Thanks to Ryan and to Valmont Academy and Kings Point for hosting us as we are all here in central Newfoundland today. Today we are looking towards a future based on evidence, vaccination rates, and Dr. Fitzgerald's guidance, and a return to school year that is more familiar to all of us. As long as the prevalence of COVID-19 in Newfoundland and Labrador stays low, students, educators, and staff will be able to get back into the classrooms and onto buses and the usual school activities we have all enjoyed in the past. The value of in-person education is clearer today than ever before. The value of vaccinations is also long established, but right now the COVID-19 vaccine is critical for us to emerge from this pandemic. Vaccines remain the single most effective tool to reduce the spread of the virus. And I encourage everyone who's listening now or who has family members or friends who hasn't been vaccinated to please do your part to protect our entire society and get vaccinated. Minister Osborne will lay out the specifics of the plan, but I just want to take a quick opportunity to thank everyone in the school system to once again for rising to the occasion. What had to be an incredible, difficult year for parents, teachers, educators, and administrators alike. So thank you very much. Our district partners, school administrators, and especially our students and teachers have faced a year like no other. And while it wasn't easy, I can tell you, having seen the education firsthand online and having to pivot quickly in our own household, we did all get through it together. I also want to thank Dr. Fitzgerald and her team for their continued guidance. And I think we need to recognize that this guidance has put us in a better position than many other provinces across our country. While I know there are people out there right now that will have anxieties about the plan that Minister Osborne is about to release. But please know that this plan is based on Dr. Fitzgerald and her team's guidance, on our local evidence, on our local vaccination rates, on our local epidemiology. But this is also a dynamic plan and one that will allow us to respond if required. Today we move forward, but I know that we have learned many lessons from the past year, and those lessons are indeed contemplated and actioned within this plan. With that, I'll ask Minister Osborne to come over and announce the return to school plan for 2021.
Thank you, Premier, and wanted to thank Ryan Kelly as well for allowing us to use his school, and Brian Moore for helping set this up. Good morning, everybody. In light of the current status of COVID-19, Public Health has provided recommendations, as the Premier has outlined, for the upcoming school year based on community transmission risk. Our plan is risk-based with different approaches for low risk or high risk of COVID-19 transmission. The low risk approach represents a scaling back of public health measures that were in place last year, while the high risk approach is similar to the plan we had in place last year. Public Health will determine the risk level and will provide guidance to the school districts on how to proceed in an area if it enters the high risk category. If the current low prevalence of COVID-19 is still in place on September 8th, all schools should start the school year in a low risk designation. And here's what that looks like. First, schools will return to full attendance instead of blended learning. Cohorts and physical distancing of 2 meters are not required in low risk, but schools will continue to take measures to prevent crowding in indoor common spaces like hallways. On masking, wearing a mask is still acceptable, and we encourage it for those who wish to do so, but will no longer be mandatory. Busing will also return to normal capacity under low risk, and mask wearing will not be required. Extracurricular activities like field trips, intersports and arts events, and other special interest activities can resume under low risk. Finally, I'm happy to say that in any school in low risk, on the first week of school, parents of kindergarten students can attend with their children. Please keep an eye out for our social media posts and departmental website, because we will be sharing helpful information, including the full plan document, which will also deepen your understanding of how measures will tighten again if we end up in a high-risk situation. In closing, as we look forward to a school year that is closer to normal, we must take this opportunity and not take it for granted. The Back to School plan we are providing today was a collaborative effort of all stakeholders. And as the Premier did, I also want to thank Public Health, and in particular, Dr. Janice Fitzgerald, for their guidance. I also want to thank Tony Stack and Kim Christianson and their team for their partnership, the several meetings and discussions we've had over the past couple of weeks, developing this plan, and in fact, throughout the past school year. I also want to thank the leadership of NAEP, CUPE, and the NLTA for the discussions we've had and the guidance that they've provided, or the input they've provided on this back to school plan, as well as the Federation of School Councils, who've also provided input on this back to school plan. With that, I'll turn it over to the media for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Premier and Minister. For the benefit of our speakers, there are 4 reporters registered for today's announcement. The question and answer session will be conducted in one round, where each reporter will have the opportunity to ask 2 questions and a follow-up question. Questions can be directed to Premier, Minister Osborne, Tony Stack with the Newfoundland and Labrador English School District, and Kim Christianson with the Francophone School District. Our first questions are from Colleen Lewis, NTV News. Please direct your question.
To Minister Osborne, should we go back into high risk again? How do you intend to make changes so that the pivoting you referred to doesn't happen again, so students aren't switching back and forth between blended and in-class?
Well, if we go back into high risk, it may impact only a classroom. It could impact an entire school or a community. We will take our guidance from Public Health on what that will look like. It may, in fact, mean that we have to look at blended learning or online learning if we go into a high-risk situation in some cases, or it may just mean that we take a day or two, as we saw in some cases last year, for example, in Deer Lake, to allow for contact tracing.
Was there any consideration given to having teachers vaccinated or having it made mandatory?
Vaccinations are not mandatory at this time in the province. Even with other vaccinations, you see vaccinations for young children, infants, for example. We strongly encourage vaccination for anybody who's eligible for vaccination. And I believe teachers, our educators and the staff within schools, the uptake for vaccination has been solid, very, very strong.
Next, we have Derek Furey with CBC TV. Please go ahead.
Minister Osborne, if you could, obviously the plan has a lot about what to do if public health makes a change. I'm wondering if you could explain, is there anything proactive that's taking place now to reduce transmissions in schools ahead of any change in the epidemiology?
There are. Well, first of all, vaccination is key, as the Premier has pointed out. So we encourage anybody who hasn't yet been vaccinated to get vaccinated. There are a number of things that we're doing proactively. The directional arrows, for example, in hallways and stairways will stay in place. Any protective shields that have been put in place in the administrative areas or other areas will stay in place within schools. We're also going to continue to use multiple entrances to lower crowding, as students enter and leave schools. But as well, the Premier has taken a very keen interest in ensuring air quality within schools. You'll see as part of the plan, we don't have the details yet, we're still working, but myself and the Premier in the very near future will provide additional details on improving air quality in schools.
And I want to ask you a similar question that Colleen asked. Considering there's a lot of students or children that are not able to be vaccinated, why not mandate that teachers who are working so closely with them receive the vaccine as a way to check them?
Yeah, I mean, we're still investigating all aspects of the public service with respect to vaccines, as of course the federal government is as well. But right now, the best thing that everybody in society can do to protect vulnerable people is get vaccinated. That's how herd immunity works. And so even if there are one or two who don't get vaccinated, the 100 people who are kind of protect them. And so the best thing that everybody in the community can do to protect school are people who aren't able to get vaccines for a litany of reasons, not the least of which is age right now. The best thing that everyone out there can do is get vaccinated. Because it makes sense, right? Like, where is the disease going to go? If everybody is vaccinated, it can't get into the cohort of the school. So right now, the community being vaccinated is protecting the people who can't get vaccines because they're not approved for an age or they have medical conditions. So right now, our primary focus is on ensuring that as many as Newfoundlanders as possible and Labradorians as possible get vaccinated. And as you've heard Minister Haggie in the past say, we have some of the highest rates of vaccines anyway in the country, and we've shown that with influenza and others, H1N1. So we're quite confident that we'll reach the necessary levels, and then we'll do a deep dive and see if there are demographics or particular areas that may require a certain nudge. But right now, we're confident that in healthcare, and as the minister said, in education, people recognize the value of vaccines in the workplace.
Yeah, sure. Maybe for the minister, I'm just wondering, we went through this certainly in February where schools were an important vector, or at least something that happened was a self-transmission in and around schools, or not in schools, but in and around schools. What have you learned over the last year that you could give assurances to parents that this is going to be safe this year?
Well, one of the greatest assurances, as the Premier just said, is the numbers of people who've been vaccinated throughout the province. With the high percentage, and that percentage will grow between now and the time school opens, will protect everybody. So that one of the key messages is for people to get vaccinated. We've also, things that make sense in everyday life in any event, directional arrows to control traffic movement within hallways or stairways. Pardon me?
Hand washing.
And the hand washing, absolutely. The hand washing stations will remain in place. The hygiene will remain in place within schools as well. So there's a number of things that we've learned throughout the year. We can very quickly pivot to online learning if we need to, but I believe the risk right now in the province is very low, and hopefully people will continue to make wise decisions as we move forward. In addition to getting vaccinated, if you're not already vaccinated, but just to make wise decisions as a general population, which protects everybody. Some of the measures that will take place, I'll ask Tony Stack, who I know is online as well, to talk about some of the other proactive measures that are taking place in schools, and maybe Kim Christianson from the Francophone district.
Thank you, Minister. First of all, I think this is an incredible achievement for the people of Newfoundland and Labrador. Be in a position where we can open schools in a low-risk environment at near normal conditions is a tremendous accomplishment. Every Newfoundland and Labradorian has a part in that, vaccination, certainly. From a proactive, one piece that health is emphasized with us, and certainly we would emphasize to keep kids safe and students safe and staff safe, and to be able to continue to operate this way, would be the screening. The screening stays in place, and if there are any triggers for the screening, then please stay home. And that applies to staff and students. And that'll will also ensure that we stay safe. Our cleaning regimes, we're well practiced at that now. Our facility staff have all been trained up, are gearing to go. They've been in schools all summer, cleaning and preparing. They know the routines. Those will stay in place. Regular cleaning during the low-risk environment. If we do have to move in pockets to a high-risk environment, then those cleaning protocols will be amped up. So from a proactive piece, we're ready to go. We've experienced this before. Our teachers, our administrators stepped up and were able to pivot last time, and we know that they can do again. We've got a great relationship with public health. I have every confidence that if things alter in a school, classroom, or whole school or community, that they will advise us and we will adjust the course accordingly. We are safe to open, and we're so pleased to be able to do so.
Garrett, if I could just add one thing too, please. The stratification in and of itself is a proactive measure, being able to stratify. So different than the February outbreak, we have this ability baked into the plan now that stratifies risk. So if it's a high-risk situation or a low-risk situation, that can be applied to individual communities, individual schools, individual cohorts within schools as well. So there are lessons learned, of course, and we're applying them within the plan. But the most proactive measure possible is, again, vaccines. And when I see it, people in my constituents, everybody reads some of the U.S. news and some of the other news, and they are in a different risk situation than we are. So certainly we wouldn't be, going down this path if we were in a different risk assessment space. For example, the space in Louisiana or somewhere else. We're not there, though. The Newfoundlanders and Labradorians have stepped up. They've abided by the measures. They've done their part. They're getting the vaccines, and that's what allows us to be in a low-risk scenario right now. So that is also proactive. The vaccines themselves are proactive.
Thank you, Premier. Next, we have Richard Duggan, VOCM News. Please go ahead.
Thank you. How do we determine, what sort of factors do you look at in determining what makes a situation high risk versus low risk?
That will be determined by public health. Public health will determine whether or not a community is high risk or low risk, and we will take the advice of public health on whether or not it may be in the community but not affecting the school, as we saw in cases last year. But if there is an impact or a risk to the school, whether it's a classroom or an entire school, we will take measures based on the advice of public health on what measures should be in place, whether it's online learning or lower number of people on a school bus, or whether we take a day or two for contact tracing. Those measures will be taken on a case-by-case basis, and there are no two cases in the province last year that were exactly alike, and so that the plan is fluid, and it has to be fluid based on that.
And Minister Osborne, you mentioned that the parents of kindergarten students can accompany them on the first day of school. What about general access for parents or others who may require access to the school? How will that look this year?
There will be access to parents to enter schools. There will be access. In fact, community use of schools will be permitted under our back to school plan as well. So, we are in a low risk, and it is obviously thankful to the general population. As the Premier said, they've stepped up. They've gotten vaccinated. We've got one of the best vaccination rates globally in this province, and it is because of the work of government and public health and the Chief Medical Officer of Health encouraging people to get vaccinated, but also largely the general population for stepping up to the plate and seeing the importance of getting vaccinated.
Thank you. Next, we have Glenn Whiffen with the Telegram. Please go ahead.
Good morning. You say that extracurricular activities can resume under low risk. Does that include choral and band rehearsals and performances?
Yes, it does, and I'll ask Tony Steck and or Kim Christianson to provide some additional details in terms of operational. But the answer is yes. We will be allowing those events to take place, sporting events to take place, and other events. These events are important to the social, emotional, and physical health of our students. Tony?
Yes, Minister, all field trips, inter-school sports events, arts events, and every other special interest activities will be able to resume in a low-risk environment. And then should the situation change in a particular school, then public health will so advise, and then we'll adjust accordingly and put in place more restrictive measures if necessary. But the aim is to have students in learning and engaging in these very healthy and necessary activities throughout the year to the extent possible.
Okay. Air quality in schools has always been a concern over the years. I know you're going to release some details later on about that, but can you give us any idea of what kind of things are being looked at to improve the air quality in schools?
Sure. I mean, the minister and I can both speak on that, but one of the lessons learned from this pandemic is the importance of air quality, whether it's in long-term care facilities or in our educational facilities. So we recognize that, and we're putting in measures in place, and we'll have a plan with respect to air quality within the next few weeks. We're looking at, I know the plan still talks about keeping windows open and doing activities outside, which is always a good idea, of course. But we're looking at other particular mechanisms to ensure a high quality airflow within our school environment, and we'll release those when they're available. I don't want to kind of give you some misinformation at this point, but we're certainly looking at it, and it'll be something within the next couple of weeks.
Thank you very much. Kim Christianson, do you have any final remarks?
Yes, thank you. So maybe I'll just say a message in French and then in English. So, alors, bonjour tout le monde. J'aimerais remercier Santé publique et particulièrement Dr. Fitzgerald et le ministère de l'Éducation, donc sous le leadership du ministre Osborne, pour leur appui tout au long de l'année dernière et en préparation du plan de la rentrée scolaire. La collaboration entre tous les partenaires a été remarquable. Le Conseil scolaire francophone provincial en est reconnaissant. De plus, je suis heureuse d'annoncer que grâce au ministère de l'Éducation, le plan de retour a été traduit en français et sera disponible sur le site web du Conseil. Je souhaite une belle rentrée scolaire à tous les élèves et le personnel. Profitez des dernières semaines de vacances et à bientôt. Je dois aussi dire que, juste pour peut-être traduire un peu ce que Tony Stack a mentionné, c'est que c'est un plan de retour quasi normal, mais on demande à tous de respecter les consignes et vous allez voir que le plan démontre vraiment ce que la santé publique suggère et le conseil scolaire le suit. I'll just maybe say a comment in English. So, good morning, everyone. I would like to thank Public Health and the Department of Education for their support throughout the past year and in preparation for a back-to-school plan. The collaboration between all the partners has been remarkable. The Conseil scolaire francophone provincial is grateful for this. Under the leadership of Dr. Fitzgerald and Minister Osborne. There's been great work together and many meetings. So I'm happy to announce that the return plan has been translated in French, thanks to the department, and it will be available on the board's website. I wish a happy start to the school year to all students and staff, and take advantage of the last weeks of summer vacation, and see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Minister Osborne, Premier Furey, Tony Stack. Our time has ended. Take care, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.